Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Watch More Movies. I'm your host, Ricky, and we are back with a new episode of the show. Today, we are going to be doing our third director dive. It is going to be in regards to the newest release from South Korea, No Other Choice, from masterful filmmaker Park Chan-wook. Park Chan-wook has been someone that I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. He has some of my favorite contemporary international films, and I really hope I can convey how strongly I feel about his filmography with this dive right here. Now, Director Park's first two films, The Moon is a Sun's Dream and Trio, to this day have nearly been buried by Park Chan-wook. He rarely ever discusses them, and they aren't available to stream or purchase digitally. Even in past interviews when he refers to his first film or his first two films, he doesn't even acknowledge their names or really anything to point to it specifically if anyone wanted to look into it. He just kind of says my first two films or my first film. If you are interested in them, like I was still, they are both on YouTube for free with subtitles. So if you are a fan of his work and want to catch up on some what you haven't seen, or you just want to kind of get into his work, they are available on YouTube. It is The Moon is a Sun's Dream is the first one from 1992, and Trio from 1997. As much as he is one of my favorite filmmakers, I can really see why he tries to hide these. They are not good. Of course, they are his first two features from someone, and Trio is definitely the better than his debut. But these have so many ideas and so many plots going through them. They both feel like they have no through line and no consistency when it comes to the storytelling. At times when watching them, I see he was so interested in the idea of temptation, betrayal, and revenge as very seeds of ideas and very core ideas, even more sentimentally, family. But both films, feel like they each needed 30 to 40 minutes because there are certain scenes that jump from scene to scene with next to no context. That would be okay if it was abstract, but everything else in the films feel very on the nose and without subtlety. And that you can't use that as a reason to fill in the rest. Despite how much I didn't like them, especially after his third film where he feels like an entirely different director, I cannot hold it really much against him because after Trio, he really just did a complete 180 as a filmmaker. And if you love Park Chan-wook and want to run out his filmography, if you just haven't seen them, they are, like I said, they're both on YouTube. On some level, I recommend them just kind of as a thought experiment and to kind of fill the OCD part of your brain to just kind of cross them off. But yeah, they really aren't the greatest, and I'm not going deep into them because why would he either? So that is The Moon is the Sun's Dream and Trio. All right, so his first unofficial film, but this is kind of what he considers to be his first film. So this is JSA, or Joint Security Area, from 2000. JSA is what, like I said, Director Park considers his real debut film, which I can see why. It is about a soldier for South Korea who is stationed on the border of South and North Korea, who is accused of crossing into the north and shooting one of North Korea's officers and killing another. We start the first 40 minutes or so leaning into the investigation, and then we take a huge left turn into the entire beginning to end on how the events unfolded. This is an incredible piece from Park Chan-wook, and a great surprising acting duo at the center in Lee Byung-hun and Sang Kang-ho. Obviously Lee Byung-hun was just recently in Squid Games and in Park's newest film, No Other Choice. Sang Kang-ho was in another one of Park's films, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which we will get to shortly, and Parasite. What begins as an investigative piece dealing morally gray politics into this North and South Korean conflict turns into a tense and emotionally driven piece about friendship that involves those topics on such a universal level. Never taking a side, but putting you into the shoes of these soldiers who are just humans more than their own governments suggest they are. Going back and seeing this as I'm catching up on Park's films, you can really see how he has this disdain for how people are on human levels treated from those in positions of power over them. He doesn't take sides in this film, but he absolutely does not like how Korean people have been either manipulated or brainwashed into how they're supposed to treat one another, even as he says they are just like each other, but the government has conditioned you into thinking otherwise. I highly recommend JSA. It's on Tubi, I believe. It's a great piece of political and emotionally charged filmmaking. Next up is 2002's Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. It is about a young deaf man who needs money for his sister's kidney transplant, so he decides to sell one of his own to a black market dealer in exchange for one that can be used for her since they don't match. After the procedure, he's left stranded, robbed, and has no money to show for it. So in order to make money before the procedure, he decides to kidnap the young daughter of the CEO of the company he was recently fired from. Another great example of how he starts to use explicit and vague imagery in his films to show a lot without throwing it all at the screen. Incredible thriller. As the story progresses, the lines that Park Chan-wook draws between responsible and not become a lot more blurred, and in these types of stories, you don't always get that. Even if you understand both sides of the conflict, you have a clear message of X person messed up and this is why, continue story. But he wants to tell you that you can have either the best intentions or never ill intent toward anyone, but the consequences still come back to collect. Sang Kang-ho, particularly, is a standout here as the man whose daughter has been kidnapped. As the story progresses, it is almost day and night split in the story as to the POV you follow, without giving too much away. If you look for violence or things that keep your attention, there are a few sequences here that really do keep that and hold it, particularly one involving someone being tied to a chair and electrocuted. It is visceral and primal in its execution, no pun intended. It shows the depths to which we as humans won't go to for those answers that we can't always be led to. The standout scene here, to me, is both momentarily horrifying and absolutely devastating. It is a dream sequence that is about halfway through and that kind of anchors the emotional core for the rest of the film for me. It is absolutely brilliant from Park to include that halfway through and not just at the end to give some sort of closure in a very on-the-nose way or sigh of breath, which this film does not have. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance also is the start of his Vengeance trilogy, which we continue next with maybe his best film, at least what most people consider it to be, and honestly, this next one could be for me as well. Alright, here we go. 2003's Old Boy. We follow Oh Dae-soo, a man who, after being arrested for drunken disorderly conduct, is kidnapped and held captive for 15 years and framed for murdering his wife, leaving their child an orphan. Until one day he is released and given clues as to why he was kidnapped for all those years by someone from his past. This is an incredible ride. On its surface, it is a gritty neo-noir that tackles themes such as grief, trauma, family, revenge, especially, and fate. The inevitable is that what you do has consequences no matter how long things take. There is a set piece here that is truly a staple for cinema action set pieces that has influenced countless ones to this day. It involves a hallway, and once you get to that point, you'll know exactly what I mean. I mentioned this film as a recommendation in a previous episode, the one with caught stealing and guys getting caught in the middle type of movies, but I didn't talk about it much. That's because this is a film that once you invest into it, there are so many ideas and scenes that are either brand new, something you've never seen before, something that's influenced so much before that when you see this as the originator, it's mind-blowing. Or it's full of twists that to even say those words would feel like spoiling. I don't know. I never try to recommend movies, and when someone asks why, I say there's a twist that's going to shock you, because then that's all you wait for the entire time without paying attention to the rest of the story. So for the rest of Old Boy talk, I will talk about spoilers in the discussion, at least as, just so you're aware of it. So when Oh Dae-soo begins to uncover who his captor really is, a former student at the school they attended, much younger, and that Oh Dae-soo and his friend had seen him and his sister unknowingly having sex in a classroom after hours, thus fueling rumors and causing the sister to commit suicide. The moral dynamics are, of course, very questionable on its surface. But deep down, your sister being stripped away from you because of rumors that were fielded into by this man would destroy you. Not to mention imprison you within yourself for years of not being able to move on, which in turn, he sets himself free at the end by killing himself and it kind of comes full circle. We learn that he has been hypnotized for years, Ode-Sue has, as is the young woman that he encounters and falls in love with at the restaurant he first visits after escaping. They fall in love, go on this hunt for answers together, and form a strong bond with each other through the days leading up to the confrontation with his captor. But the real shock of it all, and the kind of once you know it's coming, and you've heard about it, if you've never seen it, and you just kind of are aware of the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. The real twist comes from the confrontation. When he goes to confront his capturer and find out why he's doing this, and he finds out why, but not just the capturing part for all those years, but what happened after is what was the real torture to him. When he is told that he's been hypnotized and the girl he's been with has been too, it's discovered that the young woman from the restaurant that he's fallen in love with and that she's fallen in love with him is actually his daughter all grown up. This entire time, falling in love with each other, forming this bond, only for it to be his own daughter. He goes into this primal rage that is so raw and just heartbreaking. The emotions that you're feeling for him at this moment don't even begin to, materialize in this scene because he is just he snaps, he loses his mind, and you can't even begin to put yourself in those shoes and know what you would do. Trying to go to, Lee to kill him, and then he flips and begs him to save her and not let her find out. He'll be his servant, his worker, a dog for him, anything he can do to spare his daughter from this truth. It is truly just one of the best scenes in The Penthouse that I've ever seen on film. It is the entirety of his actions and consequences finally having their day. I hope if you are at this point in this discussion, you've already watched it because it all sounds superficial, maybe the way I explained it or didn't explain it well enough, and not very meaningful or shock for the sake of shock and just kind of being gross when you kind of find out the details of it. But the stakes at hand and the inevitability of all really hits harder emotionally than any other of Park's films to me personally. It might be one of his more sentimental films, and despite the subject matter and the violence, this is a masterpiece. I adore it so much. If you like action films with really twisted set pieces and scenes, this one is it, and it's become a cult classic in America for a reason. 2005's Lady Vengeance rounds out Park's Vengeance trilogy. It is about a woman who was arrested for the murder of a young boy when she was 18, now released, and looking to seek vengeance and find the man who framed her for it. There are lots of layers in this, and more to dig into than I expected as I was going through it, and as I was to begin with, going into the movie. After the first 30 minutes, I was convincing myself that it was a straightforward revenge film, following a character who just did something awful and finding, not a reason to root for this person and trying to find something to root for her for, despite the awful thing that she did. It kind of felt a little bit paint by numbers, but I knew that wasn't going to be the case. I was just kind of waiting for the needle to drop, and it sure did. More than revenge and the journey or end goal of getting that revenge, Lady Vengeance is about what you end up missing out on or losing a part of yourself from making revenge your entire life or your entire end game. Our lead character has a very checkered past, as it is, you find out, with the man who framed her, and while seeking vengeance, is looking for attrition for the things that she has done to get her to that spot to begin with. It is very muddy waters, so to speak, and makes it that much more fascinating and interesting as a character piece. While not as violent or action-packed as Old Boy or even Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, the emotion in this one definitely hits hard, as does one of the last scenes where our main character sits in a bathroom. That's all I'm going to say about it, but what it lacks for in violence makes up for in emotion. And it caught me off guard by 150% by tenfold, because the ending just really rounds out this entire film a lot more than I was expecting it to. The performances here are all outstanding. Our lead actress is someone who displays this brooding and intense eye for violence while being incredibly subdued and calculated. It's not a performance anyone, can do, and Park Chan-wook here directs one of his best acting performances in his films. Truly. And like I said, while the first 30 minutes or so left me a little bit disengaged, the rest is about as good as anything he's ever directed. Maybe some of his best. And I say that knowingly how extreme that sounds, but it's true. I absolutely love Lady Vengeance, and similar to Old Boy, there are lots of twists and shocks that you don't want to be ruined, and I really encourage you to go blind on this, like any movie you should, but especially this one. 2006's I'm a Cyborg, but That's Okay is definitely also one of not my favorite Parks films. It is very absurd and very sort of not necessarily satirical, but it's a very much a black comedy. It is about a woman who gets admitted to a mental hospital after she is telling people she believes she's a cyborg. There's a lot of backstory that kind of helps shape who she is, and you kind of get to see it piece by piece. There are some funny moments, and I do see what Park is trying to do with it, but it doesn't feel quite like he's really been able to scratch that comedy itch that he later does, especially with his newest release. So it is very hard to recommend this to someone and to talk about it because it's very hallucinating like, and to put that into words is also very difficult for me personally. It's just not up my alley. But it is very funny in parts, and there are some really great camera work in it. So if you are really digging his other films and really wanting to get into it and want to round it out, I'm a Cyborg, but That's Okay is definitely worth checking out. There's some good performances and some really cool imagery involving people carving into things. That's all I'll say. Next up is 2009's Thirst. It is director Park's turn into traditional horror with his own vampire film, but is not conventional by any means. We follow a Christian priest who is sent to volunteer to be a subject for a cure to a virus that is devastating Africa. After the experiment for a cure fails, he is infected with the disease but makes a rapid and total recovery after receiving a mysterious blood transfusion. Upon returning to Korea, he suddenly has an intense craving for blood and his sexual desires that he never experienced before being a priest. From there, we dig into this character who is struggling with his morality and mortality and what it means to be human with flaws in a world where you are expected to be the moral compass around you. That itself is a great juxtaposition here that Park shows us, where our priest is someone struggling to keep his desires in check and keeping a moral compass around him as a shield of sorts, while he is having an affair with his childhood friend's wife, whom he is later told he has been abusing her for years, and they decide to plot to kill him. What you find out that through various circumstances is that she was not abused by him, just suffering from severe depression and the feeling of being trapped in this house that she can never leave or is allowed to. Then in turn fights her own morality of never having freedom and protecting it at all costs. Again, another great story juxtaposition here that works really well in tandem that was not expected for me. The priest is trying to hold on to his own morality while she does everything she can to not listen to her own, and using that to give in to her own wants and desires. What I think Park does so well here is that he does in many of his films, so bear with me if I repeat myself, but he really shows the darker side of our intuitions and what that does to us when we give in or try to get out of those when we're so deep in, and how we cave into those dark parts of ourselves in order just to get out of it. So if you want kind of more of a horror lean to Park Chan-wook's films, Thirst is a great one to get into. Song Kang-ho is terrific here as the lead priest, and there are some great horror aspects and scenes in this movie that I knew it was going to go into that way because it's about vampires, but it took me by surprise given the camera work and technique and, the tonal shift that Park takes with this film. In his English language debut, 2013 Stoker stars Mia Wasikowska, Nicole Kidman, Matthew Good, and a few other noticeable faces. We follow our main character, India, just after her father dies when her uncle, played by Matthew Good, enters her and her mother's life, whom they had no knowledge of before. What follows is an unnerving and slow-paced thriller about family, violent nature in all people, and what influence does to people in vulnerable positions. Matthew Good's character is really unsettling from the moment he comes on screen, watching his brother's funeral only from a distance, noticed by India, He is someone who is jealous by nature, obsessive, and protective in the wrong ways. There is no second guessing that he has good intentions or means well. Everything he does is for his own gain, even if it's out of his own love, but it still is not well intentioned in the ultimate end. What seemingly starts as a story of a brother obsessed with his older brother's life turns into that with also someone who's incredibly predatory and has much worse intentions than we're led to believe to begin with. It is unnerving, unsettling, yet a bit tamed down in regards to Park's other films. I feel like the script really let down his biggest strengths. It tells you much of what it's trying to say without much work being done. It's kind of just throwing the words at you instead of letting Park direct it and show you. In terms of studio filmmaking and thrillers, it still is pretty solid, thus at times feeling like a melodrama and less symbolic or provocative than some of his other films. Aside from the script, though, what hampers it down for me personally is all the acting choices here feel incredibly miscast. From the mother, daughter, uncle, kids at school, and everyone else, it just feels like a studio head got these names together for Park to cast instead of him choosing himself. I know I was saying how Matthew Good's character is really unsettling, which it is by character and by direction, but not necessarily because of him. And I like Matthew Good, but it's just everyone feels very miscast, and it's very unfortunate to me personally. I can totally be wrong and everything because they are really good actors, genuinely, but these roles just didn't work for me with these actors. I still recommend it if you want to start on a lower scale Park and ramp up from there and get a sense of tone and style in English language and then work your way to non English language. It isn't bad at all by any means. It just isn't up to his usual standard. 2016's The Handmaiden was a big burst on the scene in America for Park Chan-wook. While he had just made his previous film in the English language, and Old Boy was already becoming a cult classic, this is where he made his name really known more widely and contemporarily. We follow a con man who uses a pickpocket to become the handmaiden to a Japanese heiress in hopes of marrying her and stealing her fortune. With The Handmaiden, Park directs with the most precision and depth of his career so far. It feels like an elevation in terms of camera work, thematically symbolic, and bigger scope in his storytelling. The performances here are all terrific, with the two actresses and actor giving some of the best performances in Park's entire filmography. The story itself plays like a sleuth and goes back and forth in time, so in order to make that work without giving much away, needing characters and performances to show one side while playing each other to different degrees and keeping their core persons and intentions intact. While there is a heist element to this, it isn't what the core of the story is and what the emotion of the story is. What the real emotion of the story is what the heist is. It's one of the most clever ways of telling a story, and feels like only Park can do this sort of thing, but make it engaging on a plot and character level. Aside from the technical side of the storytelling, like Park's other films, there is more to say than just personal dynamics. There's a lot to take in here, especially when you look at the back and forth between the uncle of the heiress and the heiress, the power dynamic at play, and how, especially back then and in that upper class, men were using these taboo subjects to hold power over women, even their own family, for their own desire or control. The different subplots or settings are often a symbol for the agency or lack thereof of the handmaiden and the heiress have this love for each other. There are barriers, either physically or societal, that they can express or show that they want to. Now, for me, there are some small things that keep it from being Park's ultimate masterpiece, which I know it is for many people. So if you don't like watching these types of things in your film, I don't suggest it's for you because it does feel very taboo. But if you want, on face value, an erotic thriller that has more than just erotic stuff in it in the film, for like a lot of American films might do, The Handmaid is one you should definitely check out. More than just being the erotic part, it is much more of a thriller than maybe I'm describing, or maybe than it is. But it is incredible. Park Chan-wook has this elevation at this point in his career, and for me personally, it only goes up with his following two films. Now, up until this point, Park Chan-wook has started using a lot more symbolic images for his films to convey what he wants to say, and requires a lot more patience and, invested interest into unpacking his films, especially with The Handmaiden. And to me, the peak of that for his career so far is 2002's Decision to Leave. Now, for films with me personally, I have said to people that not understanding a film shouldn't take away my personal or your personal adoration or love or even dislike of a film. If you or I don't get it, but don't like it or do like it, that's okay. And if I didn't fully understand it, I can still love it. This may be the most apparent with Decision to Leave for me. While I have mentioned this in many of Park's films, and it is present in all of them, like I said, I think Decision to Leave is his most dense and, sort of abstract. It took two viewings of it, the first when it first came out, and then just recently to grasp as well as I feel I have with Decision to Leave. Even now, I might want a third watch soon to catch more things and understand the entire scope of what he's trying to say. The story follows a detective investigating the death of a man who appears to have fallen off of a mountain. He interviews the victim's wife and soon begins to become infatuated with her and fall in love with her to some extent while trying to maintain his honor as an officer. There is so much visual storytelling here that I can't quite describe it in words as it is something you have to see for yourself. There are so many motifs that Park interweaves the story, like how the detective is constantly fighting his own depression and insomnia. So in order to help stay awake, or appear to be, he's constantly putting these eye drops in. This plays like sort of a visual metaphor, a bit on the nose or eyes, for how he's trying to stay clear of who he is and what he needs to do. More than appearance to others, it's his way of trying to convince himself that he is staying clear-minded. Take another example. The woman the suspect is Chinese and does not speak perfect Korean. So she's either speaking Korean the best she can, talking to herself out loud in Chinese, or using a phone to translate Chinese to Korean for this detective. This phone motif is a good example of how Park wants her to get across how she feels while also using the misunderstandings between languages as a way not to be suspected of certain things. These are deeply flawed characters, not uncommon to Park's films, but ultimately flawed to the degree of tragic and heartbreaking on just a spiritual level. Not on a personal level, not on a material level, but on a spiritual level. The ending scene is what really strikes an emotional chord, and if you want to get into his films, this is one that got me hooked personally, even before Old Boy or before, The Handmaiden or, Lady Vengeance, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Decision to Leave is what got me hooked on him, and for me, it's still one of his masterpieces. So, 2002's Decision to Leave, I highly recommend checking it out. I would say more. It does give away a bit if I just keep trying to explain everything, but if you like a good detective or sweeping, maybe this might be niche, but a sweeping detective suspect romance that is also spiritual, that's kind of what you're in for when you see Decision to Leave. And now for the headliner in limited theaters, but as of today, I believe it will be in wide release. It is No Other Choice. No Other Choice follows Mansu, played excellently by Lee Byung-hun, truly one of the best performances of the entire year, who works for a paper-making company and by all indications is one of the best in his field. After Americans buy out the company, he is ultimately let go from his job, forcing him and his family to find a way to save money and make ends meet until he can find a new one. When he ultimately finds a potential new job, he seeks to eliminate and kill the competition for his new position. To date, this is genuinely the funniest film in Park's entire filmography, and one of the funniest movies in years. Hands down, it isn't even close. There's always been a lot of humor sprinkled throughout his films, also in incredibly dark situations like this, but this one is one of the most on the nose and loudest I've laughed at any of them, period. Aside from that, just like his previous feature, Decision to Leave, this is incredibly layered, and every frame and scene feels like it's telling its own story. I won't sit here and say I picked up on every detail or try to explain every single thing to you. I saw the film first back in October and rewatched it just a few days ago. It isn't possible, I do not believe, to pick up on every detail in a Park film on the first viewing. That's how complex and meticulous he is with the storytelling. One example, and my own personal interpretation, is Mansu's daughter, Ryun. Aside from their home, she is everything the family works toward keeping normalcy with. She's a neurodivergent cello-playing prodigy, where even her teacher doesn't want to teach her anymore because she can't do more for her, and suggests going up in professors to someone even more advanced. The entire movie, she won't play this cello for the family, and rarely talks or says anything out loud. The only time of real significance she talks about is when she repeats things that are said around her, or when they have to get up their dogs in order to save money. To me, this is representation of the family in twofold. On one hand, it's a disassociation and disapproval, for lack of a better word, of her father's descent into this person he's becoming. She doesn't talk, nor does she display her musical talents for him. It's kind of like a holding back and reserving because that's not who you want to be showing yourself to. On the other side of it, it feels like it represents a sort of glimmer of light and hope for the end of this journey in this cracked family. Something that the parents are trying to preserve at any cost, despite how bad their situation gets. Something they feel they cannot afford to lose, ironic and tragic, throughout this time. These are the subtle things that Park places throughout the story. Because on first viewing, I was grappling with the significance he places on the daughter and what it might mean. It wasn't until the end when she finally plays in the house by her brother and mother without giving context to that it came into full picture for me on the second viewing, and it was a beautiful thing that he did with this subplot. Lots of this is very slapstick humor, but something feels so natural and right when it comes to the characters that he's created that it doesn't feel like he created slapstick characters, but just normal people not knowing what to do in these absurd and extreme situations and trying anything but not be experts, and the black comedy that comes from it, especially something incredibly special given the dark nature of the story. The funniest scene to me is when Hansu is trying to kill someone he's been watching for a few days now. He's trying to talk to him before shooting him, but there's this loud music playing from the record player in the man's room. It's a great character moment for Hansu, what he is internalizing, but also just situationally hilarious. I won't give away how that ends, but it plays out and gets funnier and funnier moment by moment. Even after watching it only twice and being a brand new release, this is one of my favorite Park films to date, and I hope more people, including if you're listening, do check this out. It is incredible. It is very accessible too. So if you aren't huge on abstract or symbolic type of stuff, it's hard to get into those, this is a great one to start at. It's very funny and accessible to dig your teeth into. All of Park Chan-wook's films, in his own words, are distinct from each other. Sure, you can see the same level of craftsmanship in each one and precision he has with the camera. But genre-wise, they really do all feel different mostly. But what he is really consistent with and goes after the most is attacking the plagues of society and how that trickles down the effects from top to bottom. In No Other Choice and Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, our main characters are hung up by the neck by this capital society and feel compelled to commit crime in order to make ends meet or gain an advantage in trying to get back on track. In Lady Vengeance, The Handmaiden, Old Boy, revenge is integral to the story and a catalyst for much of what transpires. And in nearly all of his films, we follow these main characters who are met by someone or an extreme circumstance, who change who they are by events caused by those to them, close to them, or by society, and become a version of themselves that they did not know they were capable of or was even there to begin with. Park really explores the human condition consistently in ways that not many filmmakers in history will do, or will do maybe once and then just kind of use that to get other stuff made or kind of more crowd-pleasing work made. He's constantly looking for ways, new and old, inside the mind of people and what pushes them to their limits of what they will do physically or emotionally when they are just stricken by society and what this society does to people. Thank you for tuning in today to listen to me talk about one of the most masterful filmmakers out there. It has been a great pleasure and a lot of fun going through his filmography again. If you like what you saw and listened to, please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you haven't seen any of these, if my words, convince you to watch it and what you think about it afterwards. I'm on Letterboxd, Bluesky, Instagram. The link is down below. Thank you for staying tuned in with the show. I know it's been a few weeks since I put up an episode and then a few before that. Life, happens sometimes, but I'm happy to be back and talking movies with everyone. And next week I will have another fun episode for you guys, so stay tuned. That is already being recorded as we speak, so it will be there, trust me. Again, if you like what you saw and heard, please like, comment, subscribe. It helps the show a lot. Share it, repost it, whatever you would like to do. And the entire year is going to be a good one for the show. So if you like it, again, I hope you join me for the journey. Give me all the feedback you can. I love talking film, and I love talking with people about film that agree or disagree. It's so much fun. And I hope in 2026, as a resolution for all of us film fans, that even if we disagree on something, that we can all just talk about it instead of being so toxic at what it seems like it feels like in the film fandom, landscape. So again, thank you so much for staying tuned in, and until next time, watch more movies.